Hey guys, tonight we begin our journey not with trumpets or scrolls or shimmering castles, but in the damp dark of a medieval mortuary hut where the smell of death isn't tragic, just Tuesday. You're not a knight, not a monk, not even a peasant. You are a funeral worker, a grave digger, coffin prepper, part time corpse dresser, and full time death companion. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in straw that isn't quite straw anymore. It's been used, reused, and something crawled in it last week and never crawled back out. Beside you, a linen shrouded figure lies on a plank. Don't worry, they're not snoring. They've been dead for 2 days. The hut is cold. Not charming, winter snowfall cold, but bone humming, damp sock, nose crusting, cold. Your breath fogs in the air like a bad omen. Your toes poke out of your socks, which poke out of nothing because you don't own boots. You just hope to steal a pair from the next noble with matching feet. Outside, the village stirs. A chicken flaps, a baby wails, a dog tries to romance a broom. But in here, it's just you, the dead, and the quiet. It's a peculiar kind of peace, really. No one asks questions. No one needs breakfast. And no one judges you for talking to yourself or to the corpse. You sit up and your back creaks like a shipwreck. You rub your hands together and realize they still smell faintly of myrrh, onions, and beeswax, the holy trinity of medieval preservation. Last night you were helping Sister Winifred prepare the merchant's son. She did the prayers. You did the lifting. The room isn't large. A wooden table with scratches from 100 coffins built atop it. A stack of old cloth, half moth, half fabric. A few empty bottles of vinegar, cleaning solution or drinking supply, it depends on the hour. And against the far wall, a tiny shelf lined with what you hope are decorative skulls. But you know better. You stretch. Slowly. Because any sudden movement might dislodge a joint or memory you don't want to revisit. There's a damp spot under your hip. You decide not to investigate. The hearth is cold. The fire long dead, probably snuffed by last night's storm, or the ghost of that particularly rude bishop. You shuffle to the door, creak it open, and wince. The sky is a moody gray, spitting mist, and the church bell is already ringing. You're late. But the dead are patient. That's one of their few perks. Outside, the mud tries to eat your feet. The graveyard squelches like a soggy pudding. Someone's goat has wandered in again. It always heads for the fresh graves, as if hoping someone forgot to take their lunch with them. You nod at the widow passing by. She nods back, eyes red, clutching a cloth bag like it holds all her reasons to keep going. Maybe it does. Maybe it just holds a half loaf of barley bread and a prayer card. In the chapel yard, you pass the coffin maker's apprentice, already sharpening his tools. He nods. You grunt. That's more or less your daily poetry exchange. You reach the back of the church, where the embalmment room sits. It smells of cold stone, dried herbs, and secrets. On the table, another body waits. This one's recent, still soft, still frowning. You resist the urge to say good morning. You light a candle, not for ambiance, but because the shutters don't quite keep the wind out. The wax sputters. Your hands tremble, not from fear, just fatigue, just a bit of leftover fever. Or maybe that's just part of the job now. As you set out the cloths, the oils, the blessed thistle, you realize this man, this fresh corpse, was someone you argued with last week about who took the last turnip. And now here he is, silent, vulnerable, needing you to make him presentable for the very people who hated his guts. You get to work. You rub his chest with a mixture of vinegar and rosemary. You pluck dirt from beneath his nails. You wedge a carved piece of bone between his jaws to keep his mouth from slumping open in the middle of the ceremony. Dignity is a delicate illusion. Historians still argue, the priest said once, about whether these rites preserve the soul or just comfort the living. You don't care. You just know the family will complain if his nose flattens. You think, briefly, of your mother. She was a midwife. You grew up surrounded by the wails of the arriving. Now, it's the silence of the leaving. You wonder which is harder. Probably the in-between. You finish your work, wipe your hands on a rag, and place 2 coins on his eyes. Not real coins. Painted wood. But he won't know, and neither will the ferryman. It's mid-morning now. Time for breakfast. You head back to your hut, past the church, past the tree that always smells like wet dog. The birds have stopped singing. Or maybe you've stopped hearing them. You sit beside the hearth and take a bite of dry oat cake. It crumbles like promises. You chew, swallow, sip some ale that tastes like it died before you did. Your hands still smell like rosemary and wax. You don't mind. It's better than the alternative. You stare into the ashes and listen. Nothing. Then again, that's your job. Listening to the silence between breaths and knowing when they've stopped. The dead are not heavy until you have to move them before your second cup of ale. You return to the chapel just as Brother Cormac finishes muttering a morning prayer over the body from earlier. He always arrives late and leaves early. He says it's because the Holy Spirit doesn't linger near cold feet. You suspect it's because his wife won't let him stay past Vespers without bringing home onions. He nods to you as he leaves, clasping his hands like you're both part of a divine plan instead of a poorly funded workplace drama about mold and grief. Now it's just you and the body. Again, you lift carefully, one arm, then the shoulders, then the hips. The trick is not strength, but leverage, and not thinking too hard about the sounds. Corpses make them. Little air pockets escaping, bones shifting, the occasional groan if the ribs settle wrong. That part, no one warns you about. You drape the linen sheet tighter across the chest, fold the arms just so. You think after all these years you'd be numb to it. But every now and then, there's a twitch of familiarity, a birthmark, a missing finger, a hint of a smile that reminds you of your uncle or that butcher who ran off with someone else's wife. You blink. You get back to work. You carry the body to the antechamber, where the coffin sits waiting. The boards were nailed together yesterday, still damp from the morning dew, and they creak when you place him inside. You tuck in a sprig of rosemary, not for ritual, but for the smell. Helps keep the flies confused, helps keep you grounded. Then comes the sweeping, always the sweeping. The chapel is dusty, in a way that suggests time itself gave up trying. Cobwebs hang like neglected garlands, the stone floor is cold and uneven, and the broom is more stick than bristle. You sweep anyway. Bone dust, ash, a couple of errant toe tags that probably belong to someone named Edwin. You move quietly, not out of reverence, but habit. It feels wrong to clatter when surrounded by people who no longer get the chance. It's not superstition, it's manners. Outside, a bell tolls. One ring. Funeral day. You set aside your broom and grab the typer candle, lighting it from the hearth before the wind steals your chance. Wax drips onto your sleeve, but you've been burned worse. You return to the coffin. Press your palm against the lid. Whisper a name. His name. Not for him. For you. Saying it aloud makes the death real, makes you human, keeps the ghosts from stacking up inside your chest. Then it's time to clean the tools. Again, there's a small bench near the side door with a bowl of rainwater, a scrap of linen, and a bottle of something strong enough to be called a cleanser, but weak enough to get you drunk if you're desperate. You scrub the scissors, the shears, the clamps you use to shut the jaw, the dull scalpel with the handle carved like a fish. Not because you'll need it soon, but because death rarely knocks. It lets itself in. Some tools were passed down. The embalming hook once belonged to a man who died mid-procedure, still holding it. Some say his ghost still tries to finish the job. You've never seen him. But sometimes, when the wind rattles the shutters and the air smells like salt, you say goodnight to him, just in case. You finish cleaning, hang the cloths by the door, and pour out the water, straight into the soil beside the chapel where no flowers grow. You think that's fitting, and then, because your stomach grumbles like a haunted bellows, you steal a piece of cheese from the offering plate in the vestry. It's barely edible, hard as regret. But you eat it anyway, knowing you'll pay later. You're not supposed to eat in the preparation room, but no one enforces that anymore. The priest is too busy blessing livestock and avoiding his wife's third cousin, who believes he's a prophet, because a goose once bowed at him. You sit down on the chapel steps, chewing the cheese like it owes you rent, and watch a dog dig enthusiastically in the cemetery's northern edge. It's probably after voles, or someone's cousin, poorly buried after the spring flood. Either way, you'll check it later. This is your rhythm. Wash, wrap, wait, sweep, stitch, sit. It's a cycle of tiny rituals, none of them grand, all of them sacred, or at least necessary. There's something almost meditative about it, until someone knocks at the chapel door and announces they've brought another one. You sigh. A small cart stands outside. The wheels are caked with mud. Inside the cart is a body, wrapped in wool, legs sticking out awkwardly, like someone trying to escape a picnic gone wrong. It's the baker's boy. You recognize the boots. You helped patch them last week. Something about this one feels too soon. You nod to the man pulling the cart. His uncle, maybe? Or just a neighbor who owed the family a favor. He doesn't stay long, just mutters something about fever, and hands you a few copper coins in a cloth pouch that smells like yeast and sorrow. You don't ask questions. You never ask questions. Instead, you get the body inside. You lay it on the table. You unwrap it, and you breathe through your mouth because the fever's left him pungent. No herbs this time. You're out. You'll have to boil some thyme from your personal stash. You'll light 2 candles instead of 1. You'll hum while you work. Historians still argue whether medieval death rituals were truly spiritual or just elaborate coping mechanisms. You think that's a silly debate. Everything is a coping mechanism, including cheese, including chapel sweeping. The boy's hand is curled. You gently uncurl it, place it over his chest, and give yourself a moment. Just a moment. You whisper something to him. Not a prayer, not a goodbye, just a soft nothing. Like you're reminding him and yourself that someone saw him. Then you reach for the vinegar and the cloth, and you begin again. Breakfast comes late. Technically, you already had cheese, but that didn't count. That was more a culinary confession than a meal. Now, it's time for something more ceremonial. A proper breakfast, eaten on the church steps while pretending your cloak doesn't smell like mildew and grave dust. You unwrap a cloth parcel you tucked into your sash earlier. It contains half a barley loaf, a knob of dried apple, and a small flask of something that once aspired to be ale but seems to have lost its nerve halfway through. The bread is harder than a bishop's conscience. You chew slowly, staring out across the cemetery, where the morning mist curls between headstones like a shy cat. You can already see the path where the funeral procession will trudge later. If it rains, which it will, they'll slip. Someone always does. Mourning and mud make an awkward duet. As you gnaw your bread, the priest ambles over. Father Aldwin is equal parts dignity and flatulence. He lowers himself beside you like he's assembling a camp stool. Nice morning for a burial, he says without irony, his beard damp from whatever tea he thinks counts as hygiene. You nod. Words cost energy. Energy is reserved for grave digging and not weeping at unmarked tombs. He eyes your flask. You pass it over. He sips, winces. Still brewing it in that cracked barrel? You shrug. It still makes me forget where I am. Good enough. He laughs, which sounds like a dying accordion, and reaches into his sleeve to pull out a tiny pouch of fennel seeds. Here, he says, to sweeten your breath. You take one. Chew it slowly. It tastes like licorice and passive aggression. He stands again, eventually. Don't be late with the procession. Nobles expect punctuality, even in rot. You resist the urge to salute with your half-eaten loaf. Once he's gone, you lean back and let the chill of the stone steps seep into your spine. It's not comfortable, but it reminds you you're still alive. That's worth something. Behind you, inside the chapel, the baker's boy still lies on the preparation table. You'll have to finish cleaning him soon. But for now, you let yourself breathe. Just for a moment. The village begins to stir properly now. You hear the clatter of the smith's hammer, the bark of a dog who probably has strong theological opinions, and the distant voice of Agnes, the miller's wife, scolding someone or something or no one in particular. A child runs past the gate, barefoot, snot-nosed, shouting about ghosts, probably referring to you. You smile, just a little. Then the carpenter arrives. He's younger than you, but looks older. Too many years of bending, wood, and expectations. He drags behind him a new coffin, rough-hewn, unpainted, still fragrant with sap. He's humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. Got your box, he mutters, setting it down near the chapel door. Tried something new with the joints. Shouldn't fall apart. Probably. You run your fingers along the lid. Solid work. You nod. He scratches his beard, wipes sawdust onto your sleeve, and leaves without another word. Art speaks for itself. So does splinter removal. You drag the coffin inside, balancing one end on your hip, and place it near the boy. He looks smaller now, or maybe the box looks too big. You can't decide. You finish the preparations, hands folded, hair combed, eyes gently closed, with a drop of resin on each lid. You adjust the blanket of dried flowers, lavender, thyme, and one mystery weed that smells like hope and sinus infection. The noon bell rings, time to line up the mourners. Outside, a small crowd has gathered. The boy didn't have much family, but he had friends. Peasants mostly, dirt under their nails, grief in their posture. You recognize the blacksmith's daughter, a goat herder, and the shoemaker who once offered to patch your boots in exchange for silence. about that incident with the cider and the bishop's niece. You lift the coffin with the help of two others. It's not heavy, not physically, but your knees still protest. The procession is short, just a loop around the church, before lowering into the graveyard's northeast corner, far enough from the nobles, close enough to the pine tree that seems perpetually annoyed. As you walk, one of the mourners slips in the mud. They fall with a wet thump that's both tragic and inevitable. You pause. Someone helps them up. No one laughs. It's not that kind of day. You reach the grave. It's one you dug yourself last night in the rain, with hands blistered and lungs full of chill. It's not perfect, a little crooked, but the worms won't mind. Neither will he. The priest says a few words, some about light, some about peace, some about returning to dust. You've heard them all before, in different orders, with different names. Then comes the lowering. Rope groans, wood creaks, a soft thud, a permanent one. Everyone is silent for a beat too long. You toss in the first handful of dirt, then another, then the rest follow. Dirt on wood. The oldest lullaby. You stay behind as the others drift away. The priest leaves last, muttering about dinner and damp socks. You remain, standing beside the fresh mound. It's just you and the pine tree now. And the dead, of course. Always them. You light another candle. Let it flicker in the wind until it dies. Then you head back inside. There are still tools to clean. You'd think dressing a corpse would get easier over time. It doesn't. The human body is not designed to cooperate after death. The joints stiffen, the limbs resist. There's always a moment when you're tugging a tunic over a lifeless shoulder and it feels like trying to dress a sack of frozen firewood, lumpy, unyielding, and just slightly cursed. Today, it's an older woman, Widow Grella. You didn't know her well, but everyone in the village knew her bread, flat, chewy, and full of questionable raisins. The kind of bread that could break a tooth or maybe reveal one. But she was kind, always gave you the crust end, and called it the heart of the loaf. You like that. She lies on the table now, half dressed, looking more like a toppled chair than a former human. You're trying to slide her into her funeral robe, which smells faintly of rosemary, mildew, and the back of a wooden chest that hasn't seen daylight since the last king got crowned. You start with the underlayer. Linen stiff as gilt. The sleeves catch on her elbows. You mutter apologies out of habit. She doesn't complain. That's new. Over that, the woolen overgown. This one's dyed a gentle shade of brown. Earthy. Humble. Very appropriate for someone who's spent her life perfecting the art of raisin sabotage. You slide it down, smoothing the fabric as you go. Her hands curl slightly. You uncurl them, one finger at a time. It's a quiet intimacy, like tucking in a child or winding a music box no one hears anymore. Her hair, what remains of it, gets combed with the same bone-handled brush you've used on everyone from farmers to fallen knights. It's missing a few teeth, like most people in this village. You pin a sprig of yarrow at her collar. Not required, just something you do for the ones who were kind. There's a tear in the hem of the dress. You mend it quickly with a crooked stitch. No one will notice, but still. She deserves that. Historians still argue whether medieval funeral clothing was about honor or habit, whether the garments served as spiritual armor or just as signals to the living. This person was someone. Remember them. You think both might be true, or neither. Mostly, you think the dead look better dressed than you do. You lift her gently into the coffin, cushioned with straw and dried herbs. She doesn't protest, though her elbow knocks the edge on the way down. You wince on her behalf. Coffins are rarely perfect. Wood swells in the rain, nails rust, hinges creak like haunted hinges are required by church law. This one fits. Barely. You adjust the padding beneath her head and rest your hand on her shoulder. The silence hums, not the eerie kind, just the kind that makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, she's listening. And then the door creaks open. It's Thea, the carpenter's daughter. She's 16, bright eyed, and far too cheerful for someone who spends her days surrounded by splinters and sorrow. She carries a small satchel and a grin you'd call disrespectful if it didn't make your ears warm. "I brought you the hinges you forgot to ask for," she says, tossing the bag onto your workbench with theatrical flair. You arch an eyebrow. "I didn't forget," she shrugs. "Sure you didn't. Also, Papa says if you break another lid trying to make it fit better, he's going to start billing you for repairs." You grunt something noncommittal, which she interprets as flirtation, or maybe indigestion. She lingers, looks at Widow Grella. "She looks peaceful," Thea says quietly. You nod, then add, "She bit me once." That gets a laugh, loud, bright, bouncing off the chapel walls like it's not supposed to be here. And yet it stays. "You coming to market later?" she asks. You glance at your sleeves, wet frayed sprinkled with sawdust and sanctity. Doubtful. "Shame," she says, smirking. "You'd look dashing holding a turnip." Then she leaves, the scent of wood polish and mischief trailing behind her. You look back at Grella. "Teenagers," you mutter. She doesn't respond. You suspect she's rolling her eyes internally. You finish sealing the coffin, nails tapped gently, not driven, just enough to keep things dignified. You load it onto the cart, cover it with a burlap cloth, and begin the short walk to the chapel gate. The wheel squeaks like it's auditioning for a ghost story. Along the way, you pass a cat. It follows for a few paces, then vanishes into the underbrush. Cats don't linger where the dead lie. You respect that. You reach the crypt entrance and leave the cart there. The service is tomorrow. Tonight she rests beneath stone. You'll light a candle. You always do. As you walk back, you notice your hands, stained with wax, soil, and just the faintest trace of lavender. You wipe them on your tunic. Doesn't help. You don't expect it to. You stop by the well, splash water on your face. Cold, bracing, honest. You look at your reflection. It doesn't look back. It never does. You return inside. There's always someone else to dress, someone else to clean, someone else to send off, looking just a little more human. It's not about glory, or pay, or prayers. It's about doing something the living are too afraid to do, making the dead look beautiful, even if they never felt that way while breathing. And maybe, just maybe, dressing them helps you feel human too. You spend your afternoon among sawdust and sighs. The coffin shop, such as it is, squats behind the chapel like a wooden wart. Ugly, essential, and always shedding splinters. It smells like pine resin, mold, and the kind of sadness that doesn't raise its voice anymore. Inside, the light filters through warped slats in hazy stripes, like the sun is too tired to commit. You sit beside a stack of warped boards, sorting through planks that were never destined for anything glamorous. One is bowed, another split, a third peppered with tiny black holes that suggest someone else is living in it now. You choose the least offensive three. Congratulations, you found your coffin. Today's build is for a man they found by the river. No one claimed him. No one asked. No one even seemed surprised. Just another traveler who reached the end of his map and fell off the edge. You saw slowly, methodically. The blade sticks halfway through the first cut, and you swear softly, not enough to upset the nearby spirits, just enough to maintain your human dignity. A few feet away, the carpenter's daughter, Thea, is pretending not to watch you work. She's sanding a bench leg, but mostly she's humming the same off-key tune from earlier and sneaking glances when she thinks you're not looking. Your angle's wrong, she says, without looking up. It's not. It is. You'll split it. You stop sawing. Look at the wood. Look at her. I've made 30 coffins this year. She shrugs. And I've fixed 12 of them. You don't respond. You just adjust the angle, slightly, and continue. The wood cuts cleaner. Of course it does. She smirks and goes back to humming. Victory achieved through quiet sarcasm. She'll make a fine blacksmith's wife. Or pirate captain. Nails. You need nails. You dig into the tin bucket by your feet and pull out a handful, each one bent in some unique, infuriating way. You begin to hammer. One bends immediately. You keep going. Perfection isn't the goal. Containment is. Historians still argue whether medieval coffins were built for ceremony or convenience, whether their shape symbolized rebirth or just helped stack the dead more efficiently. You personally believe in the third option. They're shaped that way because straight boards are hard to come by, and no one wants a body rolling out mid-funeral. The boards creak as you fit them into place. The smell of fresh cut wood is almost pleasant. Almost. It mixes with the ever-present aroma of your tunic, sweat, smoke, and a little rosemary from Grella's collar still clinging to the fabric. You'll change tomorrow. Maybe. The lid gives you trouble. It always does. Too wide, too warped, or simply too judgmental. You wrestle it into place anyway, hammering along the edge until it stops protesting. Thea watches from across the room. You treat wood like it owes you money, she says. It does, you reply. In theory. Coffin fees are due last week. She tosses a scrap of wood at you. It misses, but it feels affectionate. You lean back, stretching your arms. Your spine pops like a poorly bound psalm book. The coffin stands finished, upright against the far wall. You eye it for a while. Sometimes you imagine crawling into one, just for a nap, just for the quiet. But then you remember what the quiet sounds like, and you stand up instead. You sweep the shop floor with the world's most unenthusiastic broom. Sawdust swirls around your boots, clings to your sleeves, and finds new places to itch. You sneeze once. Thea laughs. Somewhere in the corner, a mouse scurries under a barrel, probably inspecting its future real estate. Outside, the bell rings again. Not for a funeral, just a reminder that time continues. Reluctantly. You stack the tools, wipe your hands, realize you've driven a splinter into your palm. Again. You try to pull it out with your teeth, but Thea walks over, sighs, and grabs your hand. Hold still, she mutters, pulling a tiny knife from her apron. The blade is cold. Her fingers are warm. You try not to flinch. You should wear gloves, she says. I can't afford gloves. She snorts. You can't afford to keep bleeding either. She pulls the splinter out with a clean flick. You hiss through your teeth. She smiles, smug and sunlit. You're welcome, she says, wrapping your hand with a strip of linen. You look at her. Really look. There's sawdust on her cheek, a smudge of ash on her forehead, her braids coming undone. She looks like a walking fire hazard with opinions. She's beautiful. You say nothing. Because what would you say? That death smells less offensive when she's around. that the coffins don't feel quite so final. Instead, you clear your throat and nod at the finished box. Think it'll hold? She tilts her head, inspects your work. It's ugly. You nod. So am I. She grins. True, but at least you're symmetrical. She leaves you with that insult compliment hybrid and a strip of linen fluttering like a white flag from your palm. You sit down on the bench, resting your head against the cool wood of the new coffin. It smells like pine, sweat, and something that might be forgiveness. You don't know whose forgiveness. Maybe yours. You close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Outside, the sun is setting. The dead wait patiently. So do you. The next morning arrives like a debt collector, with gray skies, wet socks, and the priest banging on your door. You swing your legs off the cot and land squarely in a puddle. Wonderful. The roof's leaking again, right over the part of the floor you pretend is a rug. You mutter something unholy and shuffle to the door, unlatching it with fingers that still ache from yesterday's hammering. Father Aldwin stands there, red-nosed and thoroughly unimpressed. There's been a problem, he says. You blink. Which kind? The expensive kind. He steps aside to reveal the source of his frustration. Two noblemen, in matching cloaks, standing beside a wagon with gilded wheels and an attitude. Between them, on a stretcher, is a velvet-draped body. Clearly someone important, or someone who spent a lot on pretending to be. The family insists he be buried in consecrated soil, Aldwin mutters. They're also insisting on 5 candles, a gold-threaded shroud, and something about imported lilies. You stare at the wagon. We have moss. Not good enough. Candles? We're down to 2.5. One's already been nibbled. You sigh. And the fee? They claim it was prepaid. It always is. By someone who's now very conveniently dead. You rub your temples and nod toward the chapel. Bring him inside. Let's see what we're dealing with. The nobles grunt and heave the stretcher in. They don't offer names or thanks. Just gold-trimmed frowns. You resist the urge to trip one with a stray plank. Inside, you pull back the velvet cover and behold a man who looks like he died mid-complaint. His hands are soft, his robe ridiculous. Crimson silk with embroidery so intricate it probably has opinions. You're careful with it, mostly because you suspect the thread is worth more than your hut. We'll need the best coffin, Aldwin says, in a voice that knows full well you don't have one. You nod anyway. You've got the half-finished piece from yesterday, the one you plan to use for the river corpse. Sorry, friend. Nobility jumps the line. You wheel the coffin into the room, position it beside the body, and start calculating. It's going to be a tight fit. Nobles never die thin. Probably all the honeyed goose. As you begin the transfer, you notice something. He's wearing rings. Many rings. Gold, garnet, sapphire, and one shaped like a tiny lion biting its own tail. Your fingers twitch involuntarily. You've never stolen from the dead. You've thought about it, but you never have. Until now. Historians still argue whether funeral workers supplemented their income with souvenirs. Some say it was sacrilege. Others say it was survival. You say it depends on how heavy those rings feel in your conscience. You remove the lion ring, gently, respectfully, reverently even. You slip it into your pocket, just one, for gloves, for candles, for one good meal. The rest stay on. You adjust his arms, smooth the robe, and arrange the lilies, which have arrived slightly wilted, from a boy on a mule who immediately demanded payment and was deeply offended by your offer of eternal gratitude. The nobles inspect your work. One sniffs, the other nods. Neither smiles. Service at noon. Aldwin says. We bury him by the old yew tree. You know the spot. It's the driest patch in the cemetery, reserved for the rich, the sanctimonious, and the occasionally famous. You look outside. Rain's coming. You can smell it. The earth's already soft. The grave won't dig itself. You grab your shovel, sling your cloak around your shoulders, and head out. The cemetery is quieter than usual. No chickens today. Even the goat seems to be hiding. You find the spot beneath the yew and start digging. The topsoil comes easy. Then the roots begin. Thick, wiry, stubborn roots. The kind that make you question your life choices and possibly your parentage. You curse, you sweat, you chip away with the shovel like it insulted your mother. The hole grows slowly, painfully. Your hands blister, your back protests. You stop once to sip from your flask. It tastes like rainwater and regret. Halfway through, Thea appears. She doesn't speak, just watches. Then, without a word, she grabs the second shovel and starts digging. You don't thank her. That's not how this works. You dig. She digs. Somewhere, a crow caws like it's judging your form. The grave is done by late morning, 6 feet deep, or close enough. You toss in a handful of straw, tradition, or just padding for the fall, who knows, and head back to the chapel. The coffin is ready. The nobles are not. They argue with Aldwin about incense and hymn selection. You ignore them. You focus on the body. You adjust the lion ring still on his left hand and try not to think about the one in your pocket. The procession begins. 4 men carry the coffin. You're one of them. The weight is manageable. The indignity less so. As you walk, the rain starts, soft at first, then harder. The lilies droop, the nobleman's hair, meticulously curled, begins to unravel. Death, like rain, is democratic. You reach the grave. Lower the coffin. The nobles murmur something that might be grief or indigestion. Aldwin says a few words. You don't hear them. You're too busy watching the yew tree sway gently overhead, its roots now wrapping a new tenant. When the dirt begins to fall, you step back. The nobles toss their coins, 3 silver pieces that land with a dull thud on the wood. You watch where they land, then you help cover them with soil. By dusk, it's done. The nobles leave. The chapel is quiet. You sit by the hearth, staring into a fire you didn't light. You take out the lion ring, turn it in your fingers, and for once, you don't feel guilty. You feel like maybe, just maybe, it was owed. The shovel's weight changes depending on what or who you're digging for. Sometimes it feels light, like you're doing the village a favor by giving someone a quiet place to rot. Sometimes it feels like dragging your sins out of the earth one scoop at a time. Today it's blister heavy. The handle is slick with rain. The earth is too soft on top, too stubborn beneath. Your muscles ache, your boots squelch, and your brain has chosen to loop Thea's off-key humming from yesterday like a cursed lullaby. You're halfway through digging when the blade strikes something solid. Not rock, not root. Something else. You kneel, scrape away with your fingers, mud-caked nails and all, and there it is. Bone. A tibia by the look of it. Yellowed, fractured, too large to be the baker's boy you buried last week. You sit back on your heels and sigh. This happens more than anyone admits. The village graveyard has been around longer than most surnames. Plots get reused, stones vanish, records are guesses, and the earth, ever practical, doesn't care about neat rows. You dig around the rest of the skeleton. It's not complete, just fragments, scattered, chewed by time. You find a tooth, half a jaw, and a rusted buckle still clinging to a shred of leather that disintegrates as you touch it. You pause. Look around. Then quietly set the bones aside, off to the edge of the grave. Later, you'll gather them and add them to the ossuary, the bone room, where the long forgotten rest in artistically arranged anonymity. Historians still argue whether ossuaries were sacred memorials or just glorified storage closets for surplus skeletons. You think both can be true, and neither is particularly comforting. Back to digging. The grave is for a child this time, just 4 years old. Fever. Fast. No one saw it coming. You met her once. She tried to sell you a rock shaped like a duck. It didn't, but you bought it anyway. It still sits on your shelf, reminding you that imagination can be louder than death, at least for a little while. You finish the hole. Not as deep as usual. Children's coffins are small. That somehow makes it worse. You wash your hands in the rain puddle near the chapel, an unofficial basin, and return inside. The coffin is waiting. Simple. No paint, no frills. Just soft pine, a single rose carved into the lid by Thea, who didn't say a word while doing it. The child lies inside, wrapped in her mother's shawl, her hands folded over a stuffed rag doll missing an eye. You didn't ask who placed it there. You just made sure it wouldn't fall out. The mother sits nearby, silent, eyes hollow, lips chewed raw. You offer water. She doesn't take it. You nod, then lift the lid. You place it gently. No nails today, just twine, the kind used for herbs or dreams. At the grave, only a few people gather. Parents, one sibling. Thea, quietly holding a wet candle that won't stay lit. You lower the coffin. No music, no priest, just the rain. The sibling, a boy no older than 7, tosses in a handful of pebbles. Says something about a duck. You swallow hard, then shovel the dirt back in. Slowly, gently, as if that changes anything. By the time it's done, the grave looks like every other. Fresh soil. No marker yet. Just a small lump in the grass and a silence that thunders louder than any bell. You stay behind after they leave. You always do. You gather the bones you found earlier, wrap them in linen, take them to the ossuary. It's a cramped stone chamber beneath the chapel. The walls are lined with skulls, jawbones, femurs, all sorted by shape, like the world's saddest puzzle. You find a spot, add the remains. You whisper, sorry. Then light a candle. The flame sputters, but holds. You sit for a while. You let the silence settle. There's a kind of comfort in being surrounded by people who don't interrupt. Eventually, Thea joins you. She doesn't say anything, just sits beside you, knees drawn up, hair soaked, eyes fixed on nothing. You pass her your flask. She takes a sip, grimaces. That's awful, she mutters. You nod. It's tradition. You both stare at the wall of skulls for a bit. Then she says, do you ever wonder how many of these people were forgotten? You shrug. All of them. Eventually. She doesn't answer. You think of the child, the duck rock, the twine, the candle that never stayed lit. You reach into your pocket and feel the lion ring still nestled there, heavy, warm, waiting. Maybe it buys you a new flask. Maybe it buys you peace. Maybe it buys you nothing at all. But for now, you're not thinking about it. For now, you're just 2 funeral workers, sitting in a room full of bones, listening to the slow, steady breath of a world that forgets too easily, and remembering, if only for a while, funeral day again. Though, honestly, every day feels like one lately. You're halfway through setting up when someone shouts from the path, wrong coffin! You freeze. For a brief, irrational moment, you think maybe they're joking. Some peasant with a morbid sense of humor. Maybe Thea. Maybe Aldwin. Maybe the bones in the ossuary finally learned to talk. But no. You step outside. There stands a man in a merchant's cloak soaked through with rain, his mustache twitching with self righteous indignation. Behind him, two red eyed mourners are flapping their arms like angry chickens. And in the middle of it all, a coffin. Your coffin. Your wrong coffin. You trudge over, slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake a volcano. What's the problem? You ask, even though you already know. The man gestures furiously. This is my uncle's funeral. And this, he smacks the side of the pine box, is not my uncle. You glance at the lid, unpainted, standard size, fitted yesterday. There's a smudge near the corner, not from your hands, from candle wax. Thea's candle. Oh no. You crack open the lid. Just a peek. Yep, definitely not his uncle. This one is the tanner's wife. You recognize the mole on her chin and the scent of lavender sachets she used to keep in her apron. You inhale through your nose, deeply. Remind yourself that this happens. Not often, but enough. There are only so many coffins, so many corpses, so many candles that stay lit. You close the lid gently, turn to the merchant. Bit of a mix-up, you say. He stares. You think? Behind him, the real coffin, the one meant for the uncle, is being hauled in by two nervous boys who clearly drew the short straw. You jog over, open it, confirm the contents. Yes, large man, round face. Smells like boiled onions and mild judgment. Definitely uncle. You whisper an apology to both of them, then turn back. We'll switch them, you say simply. The merchant is still huffing, but the mourners have quieted. One of them, maybe a cousin, actually chuckles. He would have found this funny, she mutters. You and the boys make the switch, quietly, efficiently, like you're sneaking dessert at a monastery. It takes 10 minutes, one stub toe, and an awkward moment where someone tries to hand you a sausage roll for your trouble. You decline. You have standards, just not many. Back inside, you double check every coffin, every label, every sprig of thyme or yarrow or mystery weed. Then you take chalk and mark the lids. Just a small symbol in the corner, discreet, invisible during the service, just enough to avoid another comedy of corpses. Historians still argue whether medieval funerals were solemn affairs or more like social events with weeping. You can confirm. They're both. People cry, people gossip, people compare shoes over graves. You re-enter the chapel. The wrong now right body is on display. Candles flicker around him like nervous attendants. Thea has adjusted the folds of the shroud. She gives you a nod as you pass. Didn't think you'd notice, she says. You whisper, I always notice. Except when you don't. Fair. The service begins. Aldwin mumbles the rites. There's incense, slightly damp from storage. The mourners sob appropriately. You keep your head down. Avoid eye contact with the merchant, who is now convinced you're some kind of saboteur. You help carry the coffin to the grave. Lower it. Toss in the first dirt. Standard procedure. And then, just as you're reaching for the shovel, a child's voice pipes up. Why is he wearing her shoes? You freeze. You look. Down. At the body. The feet. The shoes. Oh no. They are embroidered slippers. Small. Floral. Definitely not nobleman approved. Definitely the tanner's wife's. You look at Thea. She looks at you. You both look at the grave. No one else seems to have noticed, except the child, who is now being shushed aggressively by a woman who may or may not be his mother. You crouch slowly, nod toward the child, and say, Some say the dead borrow from each other, especially in storm season. The child blinks. Like trading? Exactly. Satisfied, he nods. I hope he gave her good socks. You smile. I'm sure he did. The service ends without further commentary. The mourners disperse. You and Thea linger. She leans on her shovel. You lean on your excuses. You should write a book, she says. The art of getting away with it. You smirk. Only if you do the illustrations. Only if I get a chapter. Deal. You glance toward the grave, toward the slippers, toward the ring still in your pocket, and realize there's no such thing as a perfect funeral. Only stories. And hopefully, not too many footnotes. Back at the chapel, your hands tell the story of the day long before your mouth does. They're filthy. Earth under every nail. A thin red blister blooming at the base of your thumb. Wax streaked across your palm where you accidentally grabbed a candle too close to the flame, and something that might be gravy or blood. You don't ask. You roll up your sleeves and head toward the washing trough. It's an old barrel cut in half, filled with yesterday's rainwater and a couple of floating beetles who look like they regret their decisions. You scoop out the beetles with a stick, nod respectfully, and dunk your hands into the icy water. It's not a pleasant cold, not refreshing, like a dip in a mountain spring, more like punishment, like the water itself is disappointed in you. You scrub with a scrap of linen soaked in vinegar. The sting bites instantly. You hiss. The sound echoes off the stone walls like a choir of angry cats. Thea appears with a handful of dried rosemary and a small pot of lye soap, the kind that smells like boiled socks and regret. She plops them down beside you. You missed a knuckle, she says, before disappearing again like a sarcastic ghost. You mutter something rude under your breath and start again. You scrub and scrub and scrub. But the thing about funeral work is, the smell gets in. Not just on your skin, in your nose, your clothes, your sleep. It's not always awful. Sometimes it's faint, just a whisper of old herbs and wax. Other times, it's stronger. Sweat decay, and whatever spice someone's cousin thought would help with the soul. You've tried everything. Soap, vinegar, even rubbing your hands with mint and pine sap until your fingers felt like overcooked poultry. But the smell stays. It always stays. Thea returns, holding something wrapped in cloth. Here, she says, new gloves. You blink. You made gloves? No, I stole them. You unwrap the cloth. They're leather, soft, worn, clearly from someone with better taste than you. They'll be missed, you say. She shrugs. So will a lot of things. You put them on. They fit. Your hands feel warmer. Not cleaner, just less exposed. You're welcome, she says, wandering off before you can say thank you. You look down at the trough. The water's dark now, like it's remembering everything you just washed off. You dump it out behind the chapel, where the herbs grow twisted and thick. You swear one of them coughs. Historians still argue whether medieval funeral workers were feared, pitied, or just politely avoided. You know the answer, all three. People nod at you in the market. They move away slightly when you pass. No one ever touches you, not unless they have to. Except Thea. She doesn't flinch. She hands you tools, wraps your cuts, brushes sawdust off your shoulder like it doesn't bother her, that you handle death like other people handle laundry. You step into the back room and hang up your apron. It's stained with wax and ash. You fold it neatly anyway. Habit is stronger than reason. The chapel is quiet now. Only the candle in the corner flickers, stubbornly alive. You sit on the bench near the window, feet aching, eyelids heavy. Your stomach grumbles. You forgot dinner again, but your appetite left with the third funeral. You pull the lion ring from your pocket. Still there, still heavy. You turn it over in your fingers. It's warm from your body now, like it belongs to you, like it's waiting to ask what you're going to do with it. You tuck it back away. Not yet. Outside, the graveyard is soft and dark, soaked from the rain. A fox trots between headstones. It stops, looks at you, then vanishes into the mist. You wonder if the dead see animals. You wonder if the animals see the dead. You wonder if you're too tired to care. Probably. You hear the door creak. It's not the wind. It's not a ghost. It's Thea. She holds two bowls. You didn't eat. You blink. Wasn't hungry. Still not an excuse. She hands you one. It's stew. Lumpy. Greasy. Slightly burnt. You eat every bite. She doesn't sit. She just stands there, watching you like you're going to drop dead mid-carrot. You don't. When you finish, she takes the bowl without a word and leaves. You sit there staring at your hands in their new gloves. They don't smell like rosemary, or vinegar, or death. Not tonight. Tonight they just smell like leather and hope. At night, when the world stops performing, you return to the ossuary. It's not a job requirement. No one asks you to go. No one keeps a tally, but you go anyway. Like some people go to church, or to the pub, or into the woods to scream quietly into a tree. You bring a candle, always the same stubby thing, with melted sides like a waxed cauliflower. You light it from the hearth, shield it with your hand, and carry it down the stone steps behind the chapel where the air smells like cold lime and other people's regrets. The ossuary is a room shaped like a confession, small, stone, and echoing in places where it shouldn't. The walls are lined with bones, some stacked neatly, some not. Skulls stare out from alcoves like they're waiting for an apology. You give them a nod as you enter. They don't nod back, but it feels polite. Tonight's reason for visiting is simple. Sleep won't come, and the chapel's roof leaks directly onto your cot again. Also, it's warmer down here. The dead give off no heat, but at least they don't steal your blankets. You place the candle on a rock shelf. It throws long, wobbly shadows that make the bones look like they're inching closer. You've learned not to look directly at the eye sockets. Too many dreams that way. You sit on a stone block that once served as an altar, or a cutting table. Possibly both. Medieval dual-purpose furniture is very efficient that way. You listen. To the silence. To the creak of timber overhead. The occasional drop of water. The scratch of a mouse too bold for its own good. This is your lullaby. Sometimes you talk. Not loudly. Just enough to prove to yourself that your voice still works. You tell them about the day's mix-up, about the slippers, about the stew. You imagine some of them laugh, others sigh. A few probably wish they had slippers at all. One skull, cracked just above the left temple, always seems to be smirking. You call him Osric. You don't know why. He looks like an Osric. Busy day, Osric, you murmur. You wouldn't believe how many people think their dead are special. You pause. They are, of course, just not in the way they think. Historians still argue whether ossuaries were meant as reverent memorials or simply a space-saving solution. You think the answer depends on the size of the village and the size of the heart behind the hand-stacking bones. You didn't used to feel this way. When you first started, the bones creeped you out. You flinched. You lit 3 candles at once. You slept with cloves in your pockets and prayers under your pillow. But now they're company. You glance to your left. There, tucked in the shadows, are the remains of a woman who wore rings on both thumbs. You remember her. She came in during frost season, 3 years ago, her fingers still warm. Her husband had no idea what to do, so he brought bread. You ate it because grief doesn't come with instructions. You lie down now, right there on the floor, between a stack of ribs and a shelf of femurs. The stone is cold, but the candle is warm, and the silence is heavy enough to press your thoughts flat. You close your eyes, and sleep comes gently, like a respectful guest. In your dream, the bones whisper, not loudly, just enough to keep you from forgetting. They tell you stories you already know. They tell you the secrets no one asked for. They remind you that every person who ever mattered is now dust and history, but not gone, never gone. When you wake, it's still dark. The candle has burned down to a stub. You sit up slowly, bones cracking louder than the ones around you. You stretch, brush straw from your cloak, and say, thanks for the bed. Osric grins in approval. You climb the steps back to the chapel, hands trailing along the stone wall, like you're feeling your way out of a memory. The air upstairs is cold. Morning hasn't arrived yet, but the stars are fading outside the tiny window. You put the candle stub in your pocket. Later, you'll use it to light another, and another, until they're all gone, and then you'll steal more. Because that's how the light stays alive down there. Because that's how you stay alive up here. You never meant to fall in love in a graveyard. But here you are, fingers brushing against another's in the shadow of a tombstone shaped like a weeping saint who looks more confused than sorrowful. Thea smells like smoke, beeswax, and something vaguely floral, probably not intentional. Her apron's covered in sawdust. There's a smear of ash across her jaw. And yet, she's never looked more present, like she belongs here, nestled among death and damp moss, grinning like the world isn't falling apart one body at a time. You're here because someone dropped off a corpse after sunset and the family insisted on privacy, which in this village means don't ask questions and don't tell the priest. So naturally, you ask Thea to come along. You need help? She said, raising one eyebrow. No, you said. She grabbed her cloak anyway. Now the body safely wrapped and stored in the chapel for mourning. And the two of you are still out here, under the stars, standing far too close for it to be just about checking shovel angles. She hands you a candle. You light it. Your fingers brush. She doesn't move away. Neither do you. You know this is ridiculous, she says. Everything we do is ridiculous. I meant this. You tilt your head. You're not my type anyway. Oh? I usually go for people who don't smell like goats. She laughs. That bright, breathy kind of laugh that somehow manages to warm your ears and knees simultaneously. You try not to smile. Fail. You sit on the edge of an old stone tomb. Nobody important. Just a merchant who once tried to sell holy water that turned out to be soup broth. Thea sits beside you, her legs swinging like a child's. Do you ever want to leave? She asks. You blink. Where would I go? Anywhere. Somewhere without corpses, or priests, or people who bring you moldy turnips and call it payment. You think about it. About cities, ports, places with more than one kind of cheese, but then you think about the ossuary, about Osric, about the tiny duck-shaped rock on your shelf, about her. No, you say. She nods like she already knew. The candle flickers between you. Her hand rests on the stone beside yours, close, so close. You slide your fingers toward hers. She doesn't pull away. You sit like that for a while, quiet, watching moths dance around the flame, drawn in like doomed little romantics. One of them bumps the candle. It flickers, holds steady. You're going to kiss me, she says suddenly. You blink. Am I? You are. I can tell. You consider it. Can't, you say, not allowed. Why? Corpse handling hands. She laughs again, head tilted back. Her braid falls over her shoulder like a rope you could climb straight out of all your bad decisions. She leans closer. You do too. The kiss is soft, uncertain, tastes like rosemary and cider and something else you can't name. When you pull back, she's still smiling. That, she says, was objectively unprofessional. Report me, you whisper. She taps your chest. Tomorrow. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt romantic love the same way we do now, whether their unions were practical, arranged, transactional. You're here to confirm they were. But that didn't stop anyone from sneaking kisses behind gravestones or whispering sweet nothings into candlelit darkness. You walk her home under a thin moon. The path winds between silent houses and sleeping dogs. She stops at her door, half hidden by ivy and poor architectural planning. She turns, says, "Don't die." You grin. No promises. She disappears inside. You stand there for a moment, holding the stub of the candle you shared. Still warm, still glowing. You head back toward your chapel. The stars are fading. The crows are starting to gossip. You feel like something is shifting, not just inside your chest, but in the air. The world feels less cold. Or maybe that's just what hope feels like after a stolen kiss in a graveyard. You reach the chapel door, push it open, step back into the smell of wax, wood, and yesterday's dead. And for the first time in weeks, you smile as you walk past them because now you have something worth surviving for. The first sign is the bell, not the funeral bell, not the mass bell, not even the drunken laundry goat stuck on the roof bell. It's the tower bell, the big one, the one that only rings for two reasons: invasion or plague. Since no one's been seen in armor since last fall's accidental jousting incident at the harvest fair, that leaves one option. You step outside, boots squelching in the mud, and look towards the hilltop. The bell tower is swaying slightly in the wind. Aldwin stands at the top, pulling the rope with the determined grimace of a man who's out of prayers and down to warnings. By the third chime, people start shouting. By the fifth, someone screams. By the seventh, the baker has fainted into his own flour sack. You walk toward the chapel gate as Thea appears from behind her workshop, wiping her hands on her apron like this is just another Tuesday. You catch each other's eyes. No words needed. Plague? She says anyway. Because tradition is tradition. Plague. You say it flatly, like you're announcing light rain. Because in a village like this, disease isn't an if, it's a when. The whispers start before noon. A cart arrived from the southern road. Two of the passengers were already coughing. A child had boils. Someone saw black spots. Someone else saw a rat. Now everyone's seeing rats. You return to the chapel, where Aldwin is throwing chains across the front doors, like they're going to stop anything smaller than a particularly fat crow. No more visitors, he says. Church is closed. Until we know more. You nod. We never knew much. He ignores that. Keeps working. You check your supplies. Vinegar, sage, wax, your collection of vaguely medicinal herbs that may or may not just be dried salad. You refill the water barrels. You seal the back windows. You move the bodies that haven't been claimed yet into the coldest corner of the crypt. Thea helps without being asked. She doesn't speak much, just rolls up her sleeves and works like she's done this before. You never ask if she has. That night, the first body arrives. Not a villager, a traveler, covered in a blanket soaked through with fever, sweat, and bad omens. You and Aldwin burn the blanket. Thea brings a jar of ground mugwort and insists on sprinkling it around the threshold. It's for health, she says, or bad smells, or rats. Depends who you ask. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood disease in any meaningful way, whether they believed in miasma, divine punishment, or bad luck carried on the breath of cats. In this village, it's all three, plus a deep mistrust of anyone with unusually clean fingernails. By morning, the blacksmith's apprentice is coughing. By midday, so is the tanner. By nightfall, you've got three bodies and a rapidly shrinking candle supply. You find yourself digging graves by moonlight, quiet, alone. The shovel bites into the soil like it's bored of your hesitation. You bury them without service. No time, no priest, just dirt, and the sky, and a name mumbled under your breath. You don't touch your face. You don't breathe deeply. You start wearing a cloth soaked in vinegar tied around your mouth. It helps. With the smell, not the fear. Thea begins sleeping in the workshop. She says it's to avoid her father's snoring, but you know it's so she can be closer to you, closer to the dead, closer to whatever's coming. She brings you cloves to chew, garlic to hang, salt to scatter. None of it works, but the rituals help. Not with the plague, with your hands. They keep your hands moving. The second week is worse. 5 more bodies, 2 of them children. One of them you knew by name. You don't cry. Not because you're brave, because you're too tired. You light candles for each of them, even though you're down to stubs. Even though Aldwin keeps count. He started locking the bell tower. Says the sound frightens the healthy. You know the real reason. He's saving it. For when it's his turn. You write names on scraps of wood and stick them into the graves. You try to remember who liked honey, who danced at last year's spring festival, who used to sneak you apples with the bruises already eaten away. The ossuary is full now. The smell of thyme and smoke clings to everything you own. You dream of burning. You wake to coughing that isn't yours. You sit on the chapel steps with Thea. She leans her head against your shoulder. We're going to lose more. You nod. She takes your hand. Her gloves are newer than yours. Not stolen. Made. Stitched. With uneven care. You're not allowed to die, she says. Too late, you whisper. Parts of me already have. She doesn't laugh this time. Instead, she closes her eyes and holds your hand tighter. The candle between you gutters in the wind, but doesn't go out. Not yet. By the 3rd week, the graveyard starts pushing back. The ground's too wet. The plots are too close. The older graves begin to collapse inward, their wooden coffins long since surrendered to worms and weight. You find yourself digging through more than just dirt. Once your shovel hits a skull, clean, polished by time. It grins up at you like it's in on the joke. You nod at it. Sorry, friend. You'll have company soon. There's no room anymore. No space between griefs. You begin bearing 2 to a grave. 3, when the ground cooperates. You tell yourself they won't mind. You tell yourself they'd rather have a neighbor than be left out under the sky. Thea doesn't argue. She just starts making the coffins shorter, thinner, less sturdy. Temporary, she says, as if that's a comfort. At night, the chapel smells like rot and candle smoke and something else. Something feral and wrong. You clean as best you can. Vinegar, salt, pine needles boiled in wine and regret. But the scent lingers. You think you smell it in your sleep. You think you smell it in your skin. Thea brings you a flower. It's wilted, half crushed, and smells faintly like soup. She places it in a small tin near the altar. For hope, she says. You want to laugh. You don't. Thea is coughing now. She says it's the sawdust. You pretend to believe her. She wraps her hands in cloth, wears a hood in the chapel, carries cloves in her pockets. Sometimes you catch her praying, not loudly, just with her fingers tracing invisible circles on the wood. Aldwin is fading. He doesn't say much anymore, just mutters scripture and stares out the chapel window at nothing in particular. You take over his duties without asking. You lead the prayers, you light the candles, you write the names in the ledger, though no one's left to read them. The bell doesn't ring anymore. There's no one left to hear it. Historians still argue whether entire villages disappeared during the Black Death or simply shrank into silence, whether the records were lost or no one lived to write them. This place is becoming one of those arguments. The market square is empty. The forge is cold. The goats have stopped screaming. Even the crows seem unsure where to land. You bury Thaya's father on a Thursday. She doesn't speak at the grave. She just holds your hand so tightly you feel it through the gloves. Later that night, you find her in the ossuary, curled up beside the smirking skull you've named Osric. She's humming softly, one of those terrible tunes she always forgets halfway through. You sit beside her. Say nothing. Just breathe. She leans her head on your shoulder. This place feels more alive than upstairs, she whispers. You nod. The bones don't cough. The bones don't cry. The bones just listen. You sleep down there again. Together. Huddled between the stacks of ribs and femurs, your legs tangled like roots. You dream of ships and salt air and no more funerals. When you wake, she's burning up. You sit her upright. She tries to smile. Fails. It's just sawdust, she croaks. You carry her upstairs. Place her on your cot. The roof's still leaking, so you move the bed. You light 3 candles. Not for prayer, for light, for warmth, for hope. You spoon water into her mouth. Brew tea from mint and desperation. Rub her forehead with vinegar and sing the lullabies you only remember halfway through. She sleeps. Restless. Murmuring things you don't understand. You sit beside her, reading from a book you don't believe in. Holding her hand. Watching the wax drip down the candle like it's measuring something more important than time. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the silence tightens. You press your forehead to hers. Don't leave, you whisper. Not like this. Not yet. She opens her eyes. Just for a moment. Long enough to say, I told you, you'd kiss me again. Then she falls asleep, breathing. Still breathing. You don't sleep. You just wait. Because that's what you do. You wait, you light candles, you write names, and you pray. Not to saints or spirits, to stubborn lungs and late miracles. The rain returns just before dawn, like a sigh from a god that's forgotten how to speak clearly. You sit by the window, watching it pool between the headstones. The cemetery looks like it's drowning in its own memories. The graves are sinking. Some of the markers have tilted, their letters worn blank by time, wind, and indifference. You know them all by heart now, where the tanner's boy rests, where the old midwife sleeps, with her hands still curled like she's holding a newborn, where the child with the duck rock was buried, though even that grave is starting to cave in. You can't keep up anymore. You're running out of earth. So you dig shallow. You don't want to. You hate it. But you have no choice. This morning, 2 more corpses arrived in a cart pulled by a donkey that looked thoroughly fed up with the situation. The man who brought them didn't say a word, just nodded, dropped the reins, and walked away without looking back. You recognize one of the dead, a cobbler. Gave you a free repair once when your boot split at the heel. Said it was bad luck to walk uneven. You dig his grave yourself, just 2 feet deep. You tell yourself it's temporary. You'll come back and dig deeper later. You won't. As you shovel, the rain makes mud of everything. The handle slips in your hands. Your gloves are soaked through. You wipe your brow and leave a smear of dirt across your face. From the chapel, Thea watches. She's standing, just barely, wrapped in a shawl too thin for this weather. Her skin is pale, her lips cracked, but her eyes are focused. You wave. She doesn't wave back. Later, when you return to her bedside, she says, "We need to start burning them." You pause. What? There's no space left, and they're rotting too fast. You sit beside her. Shake your head. We bury, we always bury. We're not going to outrun this, she says softly. The ground's telling us that. Historians still argue whether plague cremations were common or condemned, whether fire was mercy or heresy, whether the act was one of necessity or desperation. Right now, you feel desperate. You look at your hands, stained, split. You light a candle and stare at the flame. That night, you try. You build a pyre. You do it far from the graves, near the edge of the woods, where the trees grow thin and the air smells like moss and memory. You bring one of the unclaimed corpses. No name, no record, just a ring with no stone and a tattoo you can't translate. You say something, not a prayer, not quite. You strike flint. The fire hesitates, then roars. It's not quick. It's not clean, but it's done. You return to the chapel reeking of ash and smoke and something else you can't name, something that clings to your teeth. Thea is asleep. You sit beside her, not bothering to wash. The smell of the fire is in your hair, in your breath. She stirs, sniffs, wrinkles her nose. You started? You nod. She closes her eyes again, says, "Good." You don't ask how she feels. She doesn't lie about it anyway. You look at the candles, 3 of them tonight, one already guttered, one nearly gone. You relight the stub you carried from the ossuary days ago. It flares. Just enough. You dream that night of shallow graves filled with rain, coffins floating like boats. You're rowing with a shovel. Thea sits behind you, sewing a glove from ash and bone. She tells you not to stop paddling. You don't. When you wake, it's raining again. The graves are full. The pyres are ready. And the dead are not waiting anymore. They are coming in faster than you can carry them, faster than you can remember them, faster than you can forgive yourself. You grab your gloves, your flint, and your will, and head out into the storm. The cart arrives just before midday. This time, it's different. There's no mule, no peasant, no warning, just the sound of velvet flapping in the wind and the sharp gleam of gilded wheels cutting through the mud like a funeral procession that forgot to bring mourners. You know that cart. Everyone in the village knows it. It's the Duke's. Or rather, it was. You approach cautiously, boots sinking into the wet soil. The sky above is a dull gray bruise. The chapel bell doesn't ring. Aldwin doesn't emerge. No one does. You pull back the velvet curtain and stare. The body inside is wrapped in silk, royal blue, trimmed in silver thread, so fine you think it might actually hum if you listen hard enough. He's young, pale, dressed for a coronation he'll never attend. You've buried nobles before, but never one this close to power, this far from their castle, and certainly never delivered without a guard, a letter, or a bribe. There's no note, just him, and a single bag of coins tucked beneath his folded hands. The message is clear. Make it clean. Make it fast. Make it disappear. You call Thea. She limps slightly now, still refusing to admit how weak she's become. She leans against the chapel doorframe, eyes narrowed at the cart. "Fancy," she mutters. "Too fancy." She raises an eyebrow. "You want me to carve cherubs on the coffin?" You consider, then shake your head. Just less splinters. She smirks. So, none of yours then? You don't rise to the bait. You and Thea work in silence. She shapes the boards while you prep the body. The silk robe slides under your hands like water. There are no marks, no wounds, just a faint scent of lavender and something metallic beneath. You tuck the coins into a jar. 15 of them. More than you've seen in months. You'll use them to buy candles. Maybe soap. Maybe food. Maybe not. You wrap the Duke's son in linen beneath his robes. Slide him gently into the coffin. It's too nice. Feels wrong to put it in the ground. But you do. Historians still argue whether nobility truly received better burials, or just louder ones. Whether the pageantry masked the same inevitable rot. You know the answer. You've smelled it, touched it, dug it up more than once. You know this boy will bloat like all the others. Know the worms won't care about his pedigree. Know the velvet will stain with the same color every corpse gives back to the world. But still, you work carefully, not for him, for you. At the graveyard, you choose a spot under the gnarled tree near the hill. Private, discreet, you don't dig too deep. The ground is saturated again. You've given up, pretending it'll hold. As you lower the coffin, the wood creaks softly, like it knows. Thea tosses in a single flower, one she found near the compost pile, wilted. Still brave, you both stand in the rain. No words, no ceremony, just mud, and the quiet sound of silver coins rattling in your pocket. Later, back in the chapel, you sit beside Thea and unwrap the jar. You count the coins. She watches. You keeping them? She asks. You nod. Then hand her 3. For new boots. She takes them slowly. Your generosity astounds, she says. You smile. I'm famously generous. She rolls her eyes, then leans her head against your shoulder. Did you ever think we'd be here? She whispers. In a chapel, counting dead, noble coins while the village collapses around us? Yes, all the time. She laughs, just once, but it echoes. That night you dream again, not of graves, not of fire, but of velvet coffins floating down a flooded street, lit by candles, balanced on lily pads. Thea sits on one of them, steering with a shovel, whistling something badly. You wake up smiling. The chapel is still cold. The candles still burn low. The graveyard still waits. But for one moment, one impossible, ridiculous moment, you believe in something softer, something stitched between griefs, something like love. The rats arrive before the bodies do. You hear them first, scratching in the walls of the chapel, darting between pews like tiny funeral guests dressed in fur and insolence. One runs across the altar, another climbs into the offering box and promptly dies. Probably symbolic. You set traps. Thea rolls her eyes. They're smarter than we are. They're also smaller and faster. Don't rub it in. One of the rats is missing half a tail and seems to have developed an appetite for candle wax. You name him Bishop. He's currently chewing a hymnal. You don't stop him. The corpses arrive later, bundled in burlap, stacked like poorly folded laundry, in the back of a wagon that smells like spoiled turnips and stale sin. 7 this time. No names, no warnings, just a note pinned to the side that reads, "Too many. Handle as you then see fit." You hate that sentence. Handle, like their luggage, or leaky barrels of grain. You and Thea get to work. No coffins, no linen, just pyres. The village isn't even trying to bury its dead anymore. They bring them to you, like bad dreams dropped at your doorstep. There's no pretense now, just plague, just ash, just you. Thea has stopped wearing her gloves. You don't ask why. You've stopped wearing yours too. What's the point? You build the fire near the edge of the field, the same spot as last time. The soil's black now, thick with grease and ghosts. You no longer gag at the smell. That part of your nose has given up. You stack the bodies carefully, respectfully. There's still time for dignity, even if there's no time for ceremony. Historians still argue whether medieval plague pyres were structured with ritual or simply panic. You can confirm it's both. People panic ritually. Thea lights the tinder. The fire takes slowly. Rain threatens. You shield it with your cloak until the flames catch properly, dancing over limbs and loss. You and Thea watch from a distance. You don't speak. You don't hold hands. You just stand there, breathing in the memories of strangers. When it's over, you scatter the ashes into the wind. One of them catches on Thea's cheek. She doesn't wipe it away. That night, she collapses. You catch her before she hits the floor. Her skin is burning, her breath shallow. You carry her to the back room, the one where the priest used to store candles, now empty but for a cot and a jar of vinegar. You wipe her forehead, change the cloth, hold her hand. She doesn't open her eyes, not once. You whisper to her anyway. You tell her stories she already knows, about the duck-shaped rock, about Osric's smirk, about the day she caught you trying to glue a coffin lid shut with sap and lies. You tell her she's stronger than this. You lie, but gently. At one point, you think she stops breathing. You panic. You shake her. You shout. She coughs. You nearly cry from relief. You don't. Not yet. You step outside into the night air. You look up at the sky. Clouds stretch across it like bruised parchment. You whisper something, not a prayer, not quite, just her name, twice. You sit on the chapel steps, listening to the wind push through the gravestones like it's checking names off a list. You think about the ring still in your pocket. You think about the first time she smiled at you with sawdust in her teeth. You think about what you'll do if she dies, and you realize you don't know. You've buried hundreds, burned dozens, but not her. You can't. You won't. You look at your hands, cracked, calloused, trembling. You light a candle with shaking fingers and set it by the window. For her. For all of it. For the hope that something, somewhere is still listening. The candle flares and holds. She wakes with a whisper. Not a gasp, not a groan, just a soft exhale that sounds like someone remembering how to breathe after forgetting for a little too long. You're asleep on the floor when it happens, hunched, like a discarded prayer, your back wedged against the cold stone wall. You hear it, that breath, and your eyes snap open like you were never asleep at all. She's blinking, slowly, eyes glassy but open. You crawl to her side, careful not to jostle the cot. She looks at you like you're a hallucination, or worse, a responsibility. Still here? She murmurs. You nod, swallowing something thick in your throat. Unfortunately. She tries to smile. It lands somewhere between a smirk and a wince. Water? You ask. She nods. You lift the cup, cool rainwater steeped with mint leaves. Thea swore were medicinal, though you're fairly sure they came from the same pile the goats eat from. You tip it gently to her lips. She sips. Just a little. Enough to count. You were out, you say. For how long? 3 days. She closes her eyes again. No wonder I feel terrible. You don't laugh. You just rest your forehead against her shoulder, the fabric damp from sweat and time. For the first time in what feels like centuries, someone survived. She sleeps again. Not fevered this time, just tired. Bone-deep, dreamless sleep. You let her rest. You step outside into the gray dawn. The world is wet, but no longer howling. The crows are back, squabbling over a half rotted squash someone abandoned near the chapel gate. The rats have declared victory and are attempting a tiny parliament under the altar. Bishop, the half tailed troublemaker, now holds court from atop a pile of hymnals. You nod at him. He blinks, unimpressed. You dig a new grave today, not because someone died, but because it's what you do, and because the earth for once isn't fighting back. Thea finds you there, wrapped in a too large cloak, face pale but eyes bright again. She leans on a walking stick you carved from the broken leg of a pew. You didn't expect her up yet. You're not cleared for grave duty, you say. Too bad, she replies, sitting on the edge of a nearby stone. I'm the only one who sharpens your shovels properly. You keep digging. She watches. After a while, she says, They're not coming anymore, are they? You stop. The handle of the shovel creaks beneath your grip. No, you say. No new bodies in 2 days. She nods. Her voice is quiet. Maybe it's ending. Historians still argue whether the Black Death reseeded naturally or simply ran out of people to kill, whether divine mercy, improved hygiene, or sheer randomness played the largest role. In your village, the answer is simpler. There's no one left. You've buried 87, burned 34, lost count somewhere around the collapsed west fence. You and Thea, somehow, are still breathing. You finish the grave and mark it with a blank stone, just in case. You sit beside her, knees muddy, hair damp. She leans against you. No jokes, no barbs, just the warm press of her shoulder against yours. She whispers, If I die, you won't. But if I do, you shake your head. She continues anyway. Don't bury me. You look at her. Build a raft, she says. Send me down the river, with candles and music and a pie, if you can manage. You smile just a little. Pies are hard to come by. Then bread. Just something I can share with the mermaids. You nod solemnly. Of course. She rests her head on your shoulder. You both stare at the empty grave. Not ready to fill it. Not yet. The wind shifts, carries the scent of wet grass and the faintest trace of ash, but not decay. Not today. You feel her breathing. Feel your own, matching hers. You whisper, If I go first, no raft. She smirks. No pie for you then. Just dump me in the ossuary. Let Osric keep me company. She chuckles softly. I think he'd like that. The sun peeks through the clouds, timid, brief, enough to cast a pale light over the gravestones, the chapel, the pyre ash soaked hill. Enough to feel, just for a moment, like things might begin again. You stand, help her up. Her legs are shaky, but she walks, with you, 1 foot at a time, into whatever's next. That night, you dream of water, not rain, not soup from a moldy bowl, not the wash basin that hasn't seen clean hands in weeks, but a bath, a real one, hot, bubbling, steam curling up around your ears as you sink deeper into the kind of heat that makes your bones remember what peace used to feel like. In the dream, Thea's there too, perched on the edge of a massive wooden tub with a ladle in one hand and a smug look on her face. Told you you'd smell better like this, she says, flicking a drop of water at your nose. You splash her back. She doesn't laugh. She tips the whole ladle over your head. You wake up grinning and immediately wish you hadn't. Your back hurts. Your joints sound like maracas filled with broken teeth. But the grin stays. Faint. Feral. Real. Because dreaming of clean hands is a new kind of luxury. You stretch, rise, and shuffle barefoot to the chapel door. Thea's there already, sitting on the steps, wrapped in that ridiculous moth eaten cloak that somehow makes her look regal. She's sipping something from a tin mug, broth maybe, or just hot water, pretending to be useful. You sit beside her, say nothing. You don't need to. Birds chirp. Actual birds. You haven't heard that sound in weeks. Not since the world turned into a fever dream wrapped in burlap. I dreamt of a bath, you say. Thea raises an eyebrow. Was I there? You nod. Good, she says. I wouldn't want to miss it. You chuckle, rubbing your hands together. They're dry now, cracked, etched with tiny scars from shovels, nails, and memory, but they're cleaner than they've been in months. Or maybe it's just that they finally feel like yours again. You both look out at the graveyard. The grass is growing back, uneven, patchy, but alive. The stone markers glisten with dew. Some of them lean like old drunks. Others stand straight, as if daring the world to forget them. You rise and wander down to the ossuary. It's cooler today, the kind of morning that smells like wet stone and something faintly herbal, like Thea's mystery bundles, or maybe just last year's moldy tea. Inside the ossuary, the bones are still there. Of course they are. You greet them. You always do. Osric's skull looks smug as ever. You sit. Let the silence settle over you like a second cloak. There's comfort here, not just in the quiet, but in the order. The bones are organized, labeled, remembered, even if no one knows the names, even if no one asks anymore. You light a candle, place it next to a stack of femurs, then reach into your pocket and take out the lion ring. You've carried it for weeks, maybe longer, felt it press against your hip with every step, weighed its worth in food, warmth, forgiveness. Now, you place it gently atop Osric's skull. Looks good on you, you whisper. You don't expect a reply, but the air shifts, just a little. Later you help Thea sweep the chapel. No bodies arrive, no plague carts, no frantic knocks at midnight, just dust, and the sound of brooms dragging over old stone. That night you cook. Well, assemble something edible, root vegetables, a scrap of smoked meat, a pinch of salt saved from your sock. Thea eats like it's a feast. You pretend not to watch her chew. When you clean up, she brings a small basin, warm water, a linen towel, soap that smells vaguely of time and stubbornness. Your hands, she says. You roll your eyes, but sit. She scrubs gently, methodically, as if she's polishing a relic. Do you know how many of these I've cleaned? You ask. She nods. And now it's your turn. The water runs brown, then pink, then clear. She dries your hands and kisses your fingertips. You blink, then look down. They're clean. Not perfectly, not forever, but clean enough. You go to bed that night beside her. No fever, no stench, just breath, just warmth, just the kind of quiet you want to fall asleep in. You dream again, of walking through a field with empty hands, and no one needing a coffin. It starts with a cough. Your cough. You try to play it off. Dust in the chapel, a cold wind from the ossuary, maybe even Bishop the rat kicking up trouble again. But it's not dust, or wind, or rats. It's the same tightness you heard in Thea's lungs 2 weeks ago. You sit on the edge of your cot, elbows on knees, trying to decide whether to lie to yourself or tell the truth faster than your body can confirm it. Thea's outside, tending the herb plot. It's more hopeful than helpful. Half the plants are dead, and the other half are weeds. You've both agreed to pretend are medicinal. She's humming, off key. But it's a real song this time, one with verses. And a chorus. She even hits most of the notes. You love that sound. And today, you don't want her to hear yours. You cover the cough with your sleeve. Then again, then again, then you stop counting. Instead, you grab your tools. If this is the beginning of the end, you have work to do. You head to the far corner of the graveyard, the one that floods less, slopes gently, and faces the east. It's where the sun hits first. If you believe in things like sunrises and symbolism, you begin to dig. No one's asked you to. No one's died today. But you know your ribs feel like they're closing in, that the fever is coming for your spine, that your breath is thinner than soup made by a dishonest monk. You dig. It's slow. You rest every few minutes. Thea finds you anyway. She doesn't ask why. She sees it in your face, in the tremble of your fingers, in the grave half finished. She doesn't cry, doesn't scream, just kneels beside you, takes your shovel, and keeps digging. You try to protest. She ignores you with the same ease she usually reserves for rats and priests. You're not doing this alone, she says. You sit back, wiping sweat from your temples with a sleeve already damp from your own bad ideas. Historians still argue whether plague workers buried themselves when they knew their time was near, or whether others took over, whether there was ritual or resignation, whether fear or love was stronger in the final act. You think you're about to find out. Together, you finish the grave. She lines it with rosemary. You smile. You really think herbs will keep me fresh? She snorts. No, but maybe I won't gag when I visit. That night, she makes tea. She forces you to drink it. It tastes like mud and mint. You pretend it helps. She makes you lie down. Not in the chapel, not in the ossuary, but outside, on a blanket beneath the stars, beside the grave you just dug. It's warm, she says. And if this is it, I figured you'd rather die under the sky than under the ceiling. You nod. Your throat aches. The fever blooms. But the sky is clear. The stars are real. Thea lies beside you, her head on your shoulder, her fingers tucked into your palm. Don't, you whisper. Don't what? Don't love me this much? She doesn't answer, just squeezes your hand. Your breath comes harder now, raspy, like walking uphill inside your own lungs. You close your eyes. Try to memorize the weight of her, the smell of wood smoke in her hair, the way her heartbeat slows when she's not afraid. You dream of the grave, of it filling with water, of you floating, not sinking, of Osric waving from the bottom with a flower in his teeth. You wake just before dawn. Thea is still there, still breathing, still holding on. You're still here too, but barely. You whisper, "It's time." She nods. Not sad, just resolute. She stands, helps you to your feet. You walk together toward the grave, your grave. You don't get in. Not yet. You sit beside it and wait for the final breath, for the light to dim, for whatever comes next. But the breath never leaves you. Not that night. Not the next. Not even after the fever spikes and you lose track of hours, names, and most of your ability to tell whether the floor is spinning or you just forgot how walking works. You teeter on the edge for days, somewhere between sleep and memory, between the weight of a shovel and the lift of a prayer. And through all of it, Thea is there. She feeds you spoonfuls of broth you're not sure ever existed, wipes your brow with cool cloths that smell like sage, smoke, and stubbornness, talks to you like you're still conscious, even when your eyes are open, but your mind is somewhere between the ossuary and a candlelit bath. You wake on a Tuesday. You know it's Tuesday because the rats are singing again. Or maybe Thea is. You can't tell the difference. She's sitting cross-legged at the foot of your cot, carving a sliver of wood into something vaguely duck-shaped. When she notices you staring, she holds it up. New gravestone topper, she says, for you. Or the next person. We'll see who needs it first. You smile. Barely. It takes all your strength, but it's a smile. She leans forward, eyes searching your face. You're here, she whispers. You croak. I'm always here. She snorts. You better be. I just started carving your eyebrows. You laugh. It hurts. You laugh anyway. Later, she helps you sit up. Your muscles ache like they've forgotten their contract with gravity. Your hands shake as she pours tea. Your voice is rough as gravel, but still works. I saw Osric in a dream, you rasp. Was he still judging you? Worse. He was narrating. She smirks. I always said he was chatty. She presses a warm mug into your hands. You almost didn't make it. You nod. I know. There's silence for a long time. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just full. Of everything you've both said, and everything you didn't need to. Outside, spring has started trying again. The trees wear their green with caution, like they remember the last time hope tried and failed. The grave you dug for yourself is still there, untouched. You walk past it slowly, leaning on Thea, your legs stiff like sun-starved planks. You going to fill it in? She asks. You shake your head. Might need it again. You know how I am with follow-through. She bumps your hip with hers. You're not dying. Eventually. Yes, but not today. The ossuary is quieter now. Some of the bones have shifted, whether by rats or time. Osric's skull sits proudly in his alcove, still wearing the lion ring, still smirking like he knows the ending. You light a candle, place it beside him. Thanks for the company, you say. Back in the chapel, Thea's cleared out the supply corner, replaced the rows of linen and vinegar with a tiny herb garden. It's growing sideways. But it's growing. You sit together that night by the fire. There's bread. Actual bread. Thea stole flour from the blacksmith's abandoned storeroom and traded a carving of Saint Possibly Fake for some wild honey. You eat, you laugh, you breathe, and then you sleep. Not the kind of sleep you fall into when fever grips your ribs and the world narrows to pain and prayer, but real sleep, warm sleep. You dream of duck-shaped gravestones, of Osric learning to wink, of a bath that never ends. You dream of silence, not as absence, but as peace. As morning breaks, Thea stirs beside you. She whispers, "You're still here." You nod, barely awake, and whisper back, "So are you." And that's enough. That's everything. The candle burns low now. You're still here, breathing slowly, your limbs quiet, and your thoughts tucked in, like pages between covers. The chapel is silent, save for the soft creak of the old pews and the distant rustle of wind moving through long grass. Outside, the graveyard no longer feels heavy. The stones, tilted and worn, seem to lean together gently, as if sharing old stories. And the sky, soft gray and blushing with the approach of morning, drifts overhead without hurry. You imagine the ossuary now, cool and dim, the bones sleeping as deeply as you are. Osric's grin still carved into eternity, the lion ring catching the last flicker of candlelight, and Thea, just a few steps away, resting beneath a threadbare blanket that smells faintly of rosemary and ashes. Her breath steady, her heartbeat slow. You've survived. Not everything, not everyone, but enough. Enough to feel the ground under your feet and the sky above your head. Enough to light another candle when this one fades. So let your breath deepen now. Let your body settle. Let the silence carry you gently into sleep, like the hush that falls after the final bell, or the warm press of a hand that says, It's okay. You made it. The grave is empty, the fire is low, but your eyes can close now, because there's nothing more to dig tonight. Sweet dreams.